You hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Well, I guess
Yes.
we can go ahead and get started. So we've got some people that are going to be filtering in here across campus, but let me back up here. There we go. So I appreciate everyone that's jumping online. Thank you so much. I'm also recording this for the rest of everyone else that is that actually we'll send it out to the rest of campus as well that weren't able to make it. And so we'll have a copy of this, Randy. So for everyone else, well, thank you. This is our regular recurring open coffee forum. This is our summer session. We have with us this time is Professor Randy Nichols. Thank you very much. And we're going to be covering aerospace cyber operations. So without further ado, Randy, I will hand it over to you and let you go from here. There will be a brief, probably about 15 minutes for Q&A. So with that, we'll hand it over, sir.
Is that coming across? Let me check this first. Is this, can everybody see that, or do I need to do some adjustments here?
It looks good. Just full screen and you'll be good
Yep.
to go. Yeah.
I'm going full screen right now. There we go. And I'm going to get rid of the section over here so I can see my own screen. Good morning, all. Thank you for taking a few moments to listen to the
Excellent.
graduate certificate in aerospace cyber operations. We've come a long way, as you'll see, and we're pretty proud of some of our students and what they've been able to do for us. Here's the working agenda, if you will. We're going to talk about the roots where we started, and I see Kurt's on the line, and that I'm going to take his name in vain in just a minute. We're going to look at IA, which is information assurance, InfoSec, and security of information. And then we're going to talk about cybersecurity for a moment. They are not the same thing. I'm going to specifically join in on the PII, or personal information, and how we had at the time, a saturated InfoSec field. We'll look at a metric called the Ryan-Nichols equation and why that's important. We actually look in this graduate certificate of about 8 different approaches to risk assessment, but this one is an easy one to think about. Then I want to talk about the guts of what the certificate has really gone after and we've morphed into. We're looking at terrorist threats. We've looked at such things as dirty bombs, communications, SCADA, navigation threats. And then where we now have taken the next step up, we've moved up the bar and we're stackable, meaning we can move it into the MSISDD programs and the MPA programs. And this is quite useful. I want to talk about some of the results, which is what it counts. And that's our textbook. And this is according to PlumX. One of the things that my students want to know about is careers. How much money do we make? What's the success rate? What are you looking at? And so on. I then want to let future students know what kind of a crazy asymmetric professor they've got. And we'll talk about team teaching and asymmetrics. We'll look on focusing on results. I really have only one major area, and that's what can I make the students get up to in their level of excellence, and how can they use it out in the field for themselves? I give them a 10-year warranty of death. We'll take a look at simple things like how do I apply and director contacts and so on. Let's jump. Back in 2014, this first slide is about where we came from. Back in 2014, Dean Kurt Barnard and I started discussions about unmanned aircraft systems and terrorist threats. And we at that time, I was working as the chair and director at Utica College. And we had a program that had 5 different programs, actually. And the key one was a master's in cybersecurity, intelligence, and forensics. And then we had a graduate certificate out of that. And then we had one on InfoWar and so on. We started with 64 students enrollment back in about 2008, if I recall, and increased it to 80. And then we had somewhere along 500 as a floating all the way through the program. Ultimately, it took us 4 years almost, to become NCAE-C School of Excellence, but that jumped our rating almost 25%. So something you want to do, but it takes a full-time professor. I then created, with the help of a lot of people, because the KSU administrative process was different, the certificate program. We deployed it in 2015. Between 2014 and 22, it was marketed under the title GCUAS, or Graduate Certificate in Unmanned Aircraft Systems, Information Security. As Kurt and I will both tell you that this was a terrible mistake in practice. That's not what it was meant to be earlier. We actually had cybersecurity in the title, but it never made it through with that. And the market in information security for the last decade has been saturated. and the jobs are well established, salaries are well established, but saturated. And we had competition in both the master's and the graduate certificate at both sides of the coast. Certifications were required, and we weren't using that RGC for basis of certifications. We are now. So basically, we failed to market this thing in a way that brought in the kinds of numbers that we were looking for. And there was a difference of opinion, if you will, between how we market it between undergraduates and graduates. They're very different animals. The latter is one that's usually a working adult, mature, career military or defense or organizations like Boeing or information security, but they're more interested in a much global picture. So our enrollments were small, but our performance was fantastic, as you'll see. And we lost nobody. Everybody made it through. Dean Pritchard came on the scene somewhere around 2022, and he envisioned something really great. He envisioned stackability, which is a word that I've learned now. And what he was talking about is a series of GCs, and we would put them all into an MS ISDD. And then we were moving into a new frontier called space, and this is really exciting. So in 2023, we repurposed and deployed the previous graduate certificate into the aerospace cyber operations. And as you can see, it covered a lot of things, a wide range of cyber attacks, theory, practice, risk assessments, open source surveillance, sense and avoid, cyber threats and vulnerabilities, and countermeasures. Here are the 5 courses in it currently. And there are 2 risk assessment courses, one in intelligence and surveillance and one in sense and avoid, which, by the way, is also DAA. The key one is this topics in cyber data fusion, when everything has to be taken before 684. And what we do there is put everything together into a major, huge project. Generally, the projects work with the companies that the students are coming from, but not always. And we've attacked some fantastic stuff, as you'll see. Now, I want to split for a moment to try to make sure we understand what we're talking about in cybersecurity versus information security. Each year, KSU gets a thing called cybersecurity training. It's excellent training. It's designed, though, to protect KSU's sensitive data and personal identification. It is not, and I repeat, not cybersecurity. It is not close to cybersecurity. It is a subset, a small subset of cybersecurity. That is, information assurance and security are both subsets of cybersecurity. Let's look at some definitions real quick. PII is information that directly identifies you. It can be everything from email, home address, tattoos, whatever. It's generally used by agencies for clearance information, but it's also used by hackers to tear up your life. Information assurance, according to NIST, it measures and protects and defends information systems by availability, integrity, authentication, confidentiality, and non-repudiation. InfoSec is based on a famous CIA triad, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And they apply this to network, cloud, application, and IoT. The Department of Defense adds a couple extra ones in there with availability and authenticity and non-repudiation of data. That came after some very big breaches, by the way. So KSU each year has been teaching us about information assurance and information security and personal security in 7 domains. There they are: user, workstation, remote, and so on. I met Dr. Don Parker back in 1998, and he looked at what we were doing here and other universities, and he added what was called possession, authenticity, and utility to the mix. All of this comes under information security. Cybersecurity expands everything I just talked to you about into all domains: air, sea, land, space. Actually, cyber is a domain too, but I'm sticking with air, sea, land, and space. It looks at physical security. It looks at risk assessment. This is one of the most important things we can teach our students. And threat intelligence. The latter 2 are the bread and butter of the current ACO and have been previously too. And it meets very well with the pillars of the NIST cybersecurity framework: identify, protect, detect, response, recover, or detect, mitigate, and recover. So there's the definition. So I want to focus now on what what we do. What are we really looking at in this ACO? Well, the first one is terrorists. And I've been involved for about 50 years in devoting basically my life to the protection of critical infrastructure and resources and developing training resources to protect the United States, period. So the risk of successful terrorist attack on our air defense systems, our current ADS, is vulnerable to unmanned aircraft systems and small unmanned aircraft systems. And it's increasing. And it continues to increase, especially with the Chinese implementations. Why? Rapid improving commercial capabilities, low cost, easy to train, and very easy to weaponize. And we've seen hundreds of examples in this in the Ukraine war. We've seen a great deal now in some of the African states. We've seen the Chinese use of it, North Korean use of it, Iranian use of it, Iraq use of it, of these. And so it's not a difficult problem, but we are not designed to protect ADS systems at low level flights. And how do we do this? Well, they do it by small and medium drones, basically capable of carrying everything from sophisticated imaging equipment to significant weapons of mass destruction and disruption. The D second is disruption. And those payloads are available to the civilian market. One of the places they attacked the most recently is on our GPS systems, because everything has a GPS system in it. And most recently beyond that is ADS-B. So we're looking at aircraft and where the protection between aircraft and the IFF, the communications between opposing aircraft, basically. So it works, by the way, same thing for boats on the AIS systems, same thing on submarines, same thing on ground vehicles. So we kind of need a risk metric to talk about. Now, as I said, we use about 7 of them. But the one I like, of course, is the Ryan-Nichols equations, which are now 27 years old, I understand. And it basically says that risk equals threats times vulnerabilities times impact divided by countermeasures equals the function is a function of risk. Threats are real. It can be anything from volcanoes to a guy with a gun. It can be anything from a cyber attack to a hot pan that just burned your hand, to cancer. They're real. Vulnerabilities are weaknesses in the system, generally an information system. So if you look at Microsoft, for instance, Microsoft has 10 million lines in its current OS. And of those 10 million lines, every 100,000 is a vulnerability. Doesn't mean it's exploitable, but those that are called 0-day, and we see them all the time, and they sell them because they're only exploitable for a while. Impact has to do with accounting. The impact of 9/11 before on 9/10 was 0. The impact of 9/11 on 9/12 and following several is absolutely huge. Countermeasures has to do with technologies to reduce the threats, which then reduces risks. We have a secondary equation that basically says the risk goes up when the threats goes up, risk goes down when the countermeasures go up, so on. What this does give us is a capability of a best case, worst case, and normal case. So if you go into the doctor and he says you've got pancreatic cancer, your normal question would be, how long do I have to live? And he says, well, pancreatic cancer is quite serious. By the way, the Ryan-Nichols equation is used with the American Cancer Society very effectively. Basically, you would say, well, normally you might live 2 months. The worst case is you'll be dead in about a week. And the best case is you might be survival for a year and a half. I've actually seen this in practice. My father died of pancreatic cancer, so I watched the process. At any rate, it gives you a way of bracketing various scenarios. You might say, well, terrorist threats, I thought the war on terror is over. No, it's not. It's nowhere near even close. And you can see from both the Iraqi conflict and the Ukrainian-Russian conflict that these are some of the ways that they use it. Everything from martyrdom, assassination by drone, attacks on the vessels, on water. 2017 saw 2 of those, which were really serious. Another one that is currently reaching fairly high levels is radiological dispersion devices. They're not really dangerous in the sense of radioactivity. They are disruptive, and the big deal there is fear and panic. So if this is dropped in a football game, say the the famous one we have every year, we would probably, they estimate, lose 14,000 people trying to get away from these devices, the explosion itself, and then the fear that the radioactivity will get them to. Another place that we see and we investigate in this certificate are SCADA systems and communication threats. SCADA systems are in everything. Every car you drive, every TV, every kitchen, everything that's electrical has a control system in it, or a supervisory control system. Every IoT, every burglar system, everything. And SCADA systems are so pervasive worldwide that they have a great deal of vulnerabilities that can be exploited by cyber means. Unfortunately, all of unmanned aircraft systems and all the aircraft systems that we know, most boats and most submarines and most vehicles on land have very deep SCADA systems and very deep vulnerabilities. And we have there, the government has in Utah a federal laboratory that is designed to look into the SCADA. Excuse me a minute. Pardon me, I thought I turned this off. Okay, so anyway, SCADA is a major place for cyber attacks. Another one is hijacking ASIC chip communication. This is becoming even more of a problem because most of our chips, which were in the 70s and 80s built by NASA or NSA, they now are built in Taiwan and are controlled up to about 85, almost 90% by the Chinese operations. That's why the Taiwan invasion became kind of an interesting question. And we actually did risk assessments on that too. Again, going back to GPS, corrupting the authentication of ground stations is another one. So communication is a pretty important thing. One of the places I have spent with my teams in the last 2 years is GPS spoofing. And that is the deliberate transmission of forged GPS signals. Basically, I'm going to put up four or five more satellites and the real one. And so the signals overcome the ones that are the good ones. And the worst case there is complete failure of mission. What do I mean by that? Well, we actually did a simulation based on a real case where the heart was moved between, first they operated on the gentleman, or I think it was a gentleman, in one hospital, and moved the heart to a patient on the about 4 hours away to another hospital where the teams had all come together, transplant teams had come together. And because of GPS spoofing, the carrier, which was an unmanned aircraft, was off by about 5 degrees and did not arrive on time. They lost the patient. There is a very good solution to it, and I write about this in several of our books, and that's called ECD. And it basically reduces the fake signals, but that's something else. Why would I be concerned about that, or why are we concerned about that? Look at this. The traffic control situation, collision avoidance, both on air and sea, by the way, surface runway incursions, non-radar environment, air traffic control, ADS-B are received and decoded in any receiver, and aircraft positioning and tracks are simple, plus IFF, which is not up there. One of the first things we did with my students, and with the help of some wonderful Wildcat authors, I really appreciate their assistance, is we put together a series on UAS/CUAS or counter UAS/UUV/ and we have now space involved. This is the one which we were looking at weapons about 2 years ago. Let me shift into where the ACO fits in. And this is where really the vision of Dr. Pritchett is quite wonderful, actually. We have approximately 6, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, graduate certificates, with aerospace just being one of them. We have mobile systems, cyber-human systems with Mike, Dr. Michael Arkin, machine learning and autonomous, and space systems operations. And these all filter into the Master of Science. They're all stackable, meaning that 12 to 15 of the graduate courses in these GCs now will flow into the Master of Science. Currently, we have them individualized, so you can see what aerospace looks like here going into the Master of Science core group. Michael and I and Troy Harding are working on something even more advanced than that. And that is we're taking what we call interdisciplinarian. So if we have a student that's interested in taking a couple courses here in risk, a machine learning course, maybe 2 here, one in cyberhuman and one in space, or 2 in space, or modeling in space. I mean, it doesn't have to be all of these, but interdisciplinary in our graduate certificates, then we can take that and move it into the MS. Currently, that's not fully approved, but our hope is that this will be fairly soon in the works, because Michael was absolutely correct. We need to think in terms of interdisciplinary activities. This is some of the work that my teams, along with some just fantastic Wildcat authors, have helped us with. This one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one are all part of our textbook series. We have done 8 textbooks. We have a new one coming out on August 15th called Cyberhuman Systems, Space Technologies and Threats. And it's aimed at the CHSGC, it's aimed at mine, and it's also aimed at space systems operations. To give you an idea of the reach on this thing, just in a very short time, according to PlumX today, or yesterday, rather, August 31, sorry, we've reached 172 countries, 1,809 institutions, large ones. We have 56,519 downloads. That's terrific in terms of publication for textbooks. We have about 12,000 abstract views. We're getting them at somewhere between 621 and 1250 a month, depending upon the books and so on. The estimate by the end of the year is about 65,000 to 75,000. All depends on how book 8 does in the inventory. And these are some of the names of what we've done. They're all available to anybody that's on this call for free. And maybe they might be useful in your teaching also. Here's the new one we're putting out. As you can see, we have our 18 different SMEs, many of them from KSU, and I couldn't be more proud or happy to work with them. Now, the question comes, and this kind of deal here, the question comes, what is it, what does it mean to me? I mean, I've taken this thing, where do I go? Well, here are some of the salaries and titles of jobs that fit with my cyberhuman, the ACO, and also with the MS, but mostly the ACO, and there are others that work with the SSO and so on. But the salaries are fairly decent, and they have everything from intelligence analysts to supply to cybersecurity to security to space enterprise and so on. I just kind of picked a group of them. Many of these are with agencies. They don't have to be. We have several with Boeing. We have several with organizations like NASA and ERA and ESA and so on. We unfortunately rank 40 out of 50 in terms of salaries. We're about 22,000 underneath the average. And I thought about that for a while. I thought, wait a minute, that isn't necessarily accurate, because most of these salaries are East and West Coast. Most of them East now. The West Coast people are moving away from. It used to be California was and Washington were wonderful places to work. Now they're moving into Chantilly and to Crystal City and so on. But we have quite a few here in Kansas. And the Kansas average is substantial, but we're still 40 out of 50. But the costs here in Kansas, or the costs in Kansas, are about 20% less, and that helps. Lastly, what kind of a teaching system do we have in this? This is different from many of the wonderful teachers we have at KSU. KSU prides itself on being able to meet the needs of its students, and it tends to be very, very loving is the only word I can think of in terms of the student needs and so on. I believe in team teaching. I don't like hot dogs. It doesn't mean, hot dog is somebody defined as a student that thinks they know it all, that they don't need any help from anybody else. They can solve every problem put in front of them. The problems we're dealing with in the ACO are so large and so enveloping on so many platforms that the only way to solve them are team teaching. I do have individual projects for worker service, but basically I try to form teams about 60%. I give them an opportunity to research, write, present, and publish. Part of the slides that I cancel on this meeting because of length, and I'm about to close it off here, is we've had over 80 different national presentations in 4 years. We have, as I said, the 8 books in the series. We've had presentations locally, about 25, 30 of them, something like that. And I always invite the students to come and be part of it. Why not? They help out. Why shouldn't they be part of it? And I believe in those students, and I raise the excellence bar. We try to, when we set the bar, we try to raise it each time. I don't wipe them out with tests. I don't wipe them out with papers, which can be copied and meaningless. And tests, nobody knows what you ask a student what they took, and 10 minutes later, they can't tell you what it meant or why. I give them what I call the 10-year warranty or death, and that's becoming closer, unfortunately. But the warranty includes such things as recommendations, clearance assistance, notice of upcoming jobs, networking, new provisions, consulting. I've put out about 11,500 students. I've trained at about 11,500 students by my count. I don't know if that's based on the green books I have here. And they are in all kinds of levels, but many of them reach the management level. And those become places where we can seed our information and hopefully bring some new students to work for those various companies or agencies, or at least have a cold, not a cold contact, but a warm one. This is what you see when you go to the website. Unfortunately, this has been a problem, but it's getting better. This is what comes up, the discussion of the program details and the costs and so on. And it's basically a year with 1 year, 1 summer. And here are your contacts. I am the primary contact for ACO. If you want to learn what you're going to be, what you're going to take, what books we're using, teaching and so on, training and what we expect, and get to, using Signal and so on. If you're looking to discuss administrative issues, what I call financial issues or grants or funding, that's where you go up with Michael or Troy. That's it, guys. I guess I'll open it up for questions. Oh, well, good. Thank you for no questions. I appreciate that.
Hey, thanks, Randy. Much appreciated. So yeah, let's go ahead and open it up to the floor, and if there's any questions from the group, I'd love to have them. Any questions locally, I'll source them here. So yeah.
Go. Gaurav, do you realize that this is going to apply to space systems operations too?
Yes.
We have a new one which I need you to brief. His name is Jacob Beckman, I believe his name is, and we need to get him on Signal.
Oh, I think you might have frozen there, Randy.
Sorry?
Or I don't know if it's on our side.
Can you hear me?
Randy, it seems like maybe the SLC is having issues.
Okay. I was referring to one of my students who joined us. He's in the new Space Systems and Operations GC. I was warning him that the same principles applied there. And we have a brand new student along with him, so I can start the team. We'll probably have more by the end. I see Pete Johnson, or was it Jessica Johnson? Excuse me, sorry. Pete Johnson is in the ACO, and he could have discussed it with us anyway. But so anyway, Garth, one of the things we need to do is get set up with the new students as they come in. And since you were first up, guess what? Congratulations on your promotion to team leader.
Thank you, Professor. It's an honor to be part of this class, and I look forward to learn and collaborate with you.
Good. It'll be a lot of fun. I appreciate it. Kurt, did I take your name in vain, or did we do this thing right?
Oh, you described it perfectly, brought up some memories, mostly good, a couple of frustrating memories trying to get the name where it should be and running into opposition, but yeah, you did great.
I'm sorry we didn't get the masters rolling, because I know we worked on that pretty hard too and had everything ready, but we have several of those courses still available. For instance, we have an ethics course, and we also have one on HAPS, which have not been, they've been approved. We've just never put them in action. And I'm thinking, why don't we? I'm trying to think, we had a couple, I can't remember what the other one we applied, but anyway, it was a functional one for undergraduates, if I recall.
Yeah, I
Hey,
don't
Randy,
recall
real
that one
quick,
either, but yes.
question.
Sure.
Yeah, what kind of projects can grad students typically be kind of high level? I know you've touched on a few of them, but what kind of recent projects have the grad students worked on?
Well, I'll give you the last 3 or 4 of them. The first one is we're concerned with the upgrading of the Chinese military. And so I follow all the intelligence operations that we have access to, air, land, but mostly sea at this point. And that is, I don't know if you know it, there are approximately 204 cables that go, international underwater cables that go and handle about 90% of all the European, Asian, Indian, and Indo-Asian traffic. And it turns out that most of these cables actually terminate in Hong Kong, which used to be a democracy basically, but now it's under the Chinese activity. So one of the things I asked us to do is to evaluate the risk assessment of these cables. And number 2, how many cables does America actually have control of? The answer is 2. That's a terrible number right there. We found something else that was even worse. And that was the landings, what they call site landings, so that the cable will be in these underground cables are big, kind of like a oil tube and a pipe rather. But eventually it ends on land somewhere and then goes to a communication facility. Well, the two that we own land in Hawaii, and they land in Guam, which is a very useful place. Guam is well defended. Hawaii is not. It's basically a beach where it would take nothing at all to cut the entire communications of one half of European and Asian with an explosive. And it's handled by police, not by military and so on. So we actually took a look at, I had them do the risk assessments. We did it with 7 different risk procedures. We used NIST and FAA and so on. We just basically learned risk. It was a risk assessment. And so we came up with some fascinating stuff and we turned it over to various people, including Jonathan Snowden, who is our FSO, our security officer. And he passed it on to some other people too. That was one of them. Another one was we found that in the Ukrainian war that they were dropping hand grenades from SUAS. And we wanted to know what the level of that was. We had no idea, we just see a story or two and you can't believe everything you read. I mean, unfortunately, there's news that tends to focus one way and news that tends to focus another, and the truth is somewhere in between. That's the problem. And I actually teach these students open source intelligence and how to trust or how to invest their time in researching and going beyond just reading junk. You gotta check the fact checker basically. Anyway, we found that they were doing about 25 a day. I didn't realize it was anywhere near that, and they were very effective. And some of them have gone into the Mother Russia itself. So that was another one we did. We looked at communication systems a lot. I mean, we've been involved with Assure 44. We've been involved with NIST recently, and both of these were designed to be looking at communication systems on board for small UAS and so on. Another one we did was back a ways, not far back a ways, was we had 2 collisions of 2 ships, the McCain, in the South China Seas. And so we've been tracking intelligence operations over there. And frankly, the Navy's explanation of what happened in those 2 were insufficient as far as I was concerned. And I wrote the command, in fact, and I said, we have other data that indicates that this could have been a cyber attack from a fishing vessel that in fact not knocked out the capital ship, but knocked out the freighter, which had legacy communication systems on it. And we were right. And so I've kind of become a spokesman for those 18 sailors that died. And I'm trying to bring some peace to the families and so on. Another one we've done is the European Space Station and satellite issues, how satellites are susceptible to hypersonic activity or satellite killers. And so we have one of the people that was a graduate with us as a missile specialist and also hypersonic missilist. He's written in our books, as you know, and he's been helping us look at the potential attacks and risk assessments to our communications. Most recently, we looked at the Chinese balloon. And you say, just a balloon. No, it wasn't. There's some very interesting things that happened. For instance, the fires in Canada are in a straight line, and they occurred all across Canada almost at the same time. That's not possible. There aren't enough arsonists around to do that. But it happens to have been in the Colorado, North Dakota area, which was being photographed seriously. But we believe that the balloon had other things before it was shot down. We've also looked at the difference between air defense systems in the upper air versus 400 feet versus the lower one. So we're talking about 30, 40,000 feet versus 400 feet to 2,000 feet. Another project we did was acoustical attacks on moderate drones. We look at some fantastic stuff. Another one, because the Kansas governor put out a request to say, could we take a look at what's happening in personal information because of drones being used for spying on people. So that became another project, personal information and so on. So we're covering a very wide range of platforms. It's not just information assurance or information security, which are network problems and so on. Basically, we're looking at the effect on a huge number of people and how to protect those people by the types of air surveillance and things we can do with technologies both in space and in moderate space. One other.
Awesome. Hey,
There you go.
oh, sorry, go ahead. Last
Well,
one.
Yeah. Oh, there was one
Okay,
other
we
one.
got a question from the group over here.
Go.
Good morning, Professor Nichols. This is Tim Bruner from the AARC.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well. You raised some really interesting points about our GPS vulnerabilities and essentially putting all of our eggs into that GPS basket, since so much of our infrastructure, navigation, and even weapon systems are entirely dependent on GPS to function. Do you share some of your thoughts potentially on how we might decouple from that one critical point of failure in our entire infrastructure system?
Well, there's 5 different ways to do it, actually. And I don't want to go into all of them, but basically what you know, you're correct. GPS is used everywhere. It's ubiquitous. And it's used in everything we do, from phones to from not telephones now, we're called cell phones, to everything we drive, everything we use, every place we want to know a location fix on. The terrorists know this. Google is one of the best helpers to using its Google Earth and so on, is one of the best approaches. It used to be that the military could separate out a GPS signal from the civilian one. Right now, that's essentially the same, or they're within just a few meters of each other. But there are waypoint approaches. There are laser approaches. There are what they call combination or fusion data. So I'm captain of a boat, and my boat is only 38 feet compared to some of these monsters, but the same problems occur there as anywhere else. And we have what's called an AIS system, and it's based on the satellite signals. That's not enough, because if I'm off by just 2 bearing or 2 degrees, I might find myself in a sandbar someplace. Or if I'm in a storm, I can't even pick up because of all the water and all the outside effects. So we use sonar, we use SCLAR, and we use radio. And I use combination with charts that have been used for soundings and so on in the Chesapeake Bay where I am. Not so easy to do on the Atlantic Ocean, but much easier when you have a nice chart of where things are. So you have a sense of, well, the GPS put me here, but I'm really here and I'm off by 2 nautical miles. I mean, it can be that bad. So there are several things we can do. First of all, there are countermeasures that help us in the GPS. One is called ECD. and that's Eichelberger collective detection. And what it does basically, it not only can detect where things are. Most of the research money has gone to how do I detect a bad signal? How do I detect a jamming signal? How do I detect a spoof signal? But that's not enough. The next step is mitigate it. How do I fix it? Or how do I how do I recover it? Is the third one. Well, ECD does all three. And that's what makes it a very powerful technology. It's Dr. Eichelberger in Switzerland put together a fantastic upgrade to what was a standard process called collective detection. And what it does is it says, I don't care about the bad signals. You guys keep trying to find them. Let's assume they're there. And so it puts them all into a market basket, if you will, and then synchronizes the signals and then reduces power. And sure enough, the bad satellites, 4 or 5 of them, whatever they might be, are gone. So that's one thing that works in the satellite vector itself. The second thing is I can use, supposing I'm under a bridge or I'm in what's called a canyon effect. So this problem with the moving a heart between one part of a city to another part of the city, I basically have buildings everywhere. And so the signals become easy to destroy, the signal to lock on and to change if I have that kind of a thing. So one of the things I'm going to do is visual at a distance or sound at a distance. And it turns out sound does two things. I can not only tell where I'm going by the sound, echolocation, like a whale or a large mammal, or I can use that same sound to knock out the MIMS in the UAS and wipe out that UAS, the bad one, assuming it's giving me the bad signals. And by hitting the MIMS, it knocks out the rotor, and we now have unstable UAS, and it works to about a mile, which is a pretty decent range considering acoustical requirements and power and so on. Another one is optical. They have optical technologies that I've seen. And a fourth one is a magnetic one, using the magnetics. Both of those are pretty advanced kinds of things and take me a lot of time to kind of get into. But I'll be more than happy to talk to you about it. It was done, by the way, the Assure people, so that when that report comes out, I'm sure I can get you a copy of it. You'll see what they're doing.
Sounds great. Hey,
That help?
Yeah, that does. That's really awesome. Thanks for getting us that information. So I think that is going to bring us up to close here. So
Mike, you want to tell them about the space systems operations so we can put that on the list too?
Absolutely. So we've got our space systems and operations program, of course, that we talked about a little bit here. Actually, that would be a good coffee forum for the projects in the spring. Now that I think about it, because as we get that cohort of SSO students through on projects out there, we can start to. That actually would make a really great forum if you think that works for you, Professor Nichols.
I don't know if the people on here know that I'm kind of working that one too, but
yeah, that's
yes.
we're kind of gaming it out a little bit on that one.
Yeah, I was recently promoted to take over SSO, and I look forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think you're right. The project wouldn't be a good place for it. I think we need to, like you said, we need to let them know about the masters first.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. Yeah, absolutely. So if you have any, to Professor Nichols' point, if there's any aerospace cyber operations or any space systems and operations questions, have an email address that you'd like to feel comfortable sharing with people?
Yeah. Prof. R.K. Nichols at ksu.edu. Prof. R.K. Nichols at ksu.edu is fine.
Perfect.
I'm up until about, you can, by the way, my cell phone number is 717-329-9836. And I'm usually up until about 3 a.m. So most people know that.
I do.
I don't understand why you guys, Kurt and you and Michael and others, don't get back to me. I write you all the time.
That's right. Too funny. Very good. All right. Really appreciate. Wanted to couple things. I do have a couple public service announcements, but before I jump into that, just wanted to say very much a great thank you to you, Professor Nichols, for putting this on for us. I'm very excited. So yeah, absolutely. If people are interested in the graduate certificate in aerospace cyber operations, I highly encourage everyone to go out to K-State, salina.kstate.edu. That's a great place to go. You'll actually be able to search on all of our academic programs out there that we have. In addition to ACO, as Professor Nichols had mentioned, we have space systems and operations, advanced air mobility systems, and cyber human systems. And so they all relate back up to our Master of Science in Integrated Systems Design and Dynamics. And I would be remiss, and I know Dr. Barnhart's on here. We're going to actually get him on the schedule here to talk around aerospace, our Master of Science in Aeronautics, as well as our 2 grad certificates in aerospace certification and aerospace safety as it relates to that program. So those are some things that we'll have cooking here pretty soon. So just to give you a heads up for those that would be listening to this recording and those that are here in person as well as those online, next up in September, we're going to do a grad certificate. We're going to go through our Advanced Air Mobility Systems program. So that'll be our next open coffee forum. That will be Dr. Saeed Khan, who will be headlining that event. And then after the September, in October, the next one will be the Master of Science in Aeronautics. I'm throwing Dr. Barnhart. I'm actually hoping you'll keep me out of trouble on this one on that schedule, but we'll find something in October, if that sounds good for the MSA program as well as the grad certificates.
We'll shoot in that direction. Yep.
All right, cool. So that'll be awesome. I'm excited to hear about that. And then we'll have the a deep dive into the Master of Science in Integrated Systems Design and Dynamics in November, which will pretty much wrap up. We'll have probably our new grad certificates that are going to be coming out that we'll headline in December, and that'll pretty much wrap up the year on the Open Coffee Forum. So with that, I think that pretty much wraps up what we got here. I really appreciate everyone setting some time aside for us today, and we'll see you in the next coffee forum.